खेलती है और नॉवेल्स पढ़ती है, which sometimes, not sometimes, many times I think is true. But thank you for the honor of having me here. इन चीज़ों पे आप मुझसे जब चाहें बुलवा सकते हैं, बस मेरे को पकड़ के एक कमरे में पहले ले लीजिए, because there is so much in राजस्थान. आप पानी का अगर चाहें तो there are so many water structures. Ways of how people have used the environment around them, वो सब है. लेकिन सिर्फ बातों के बजाय कुछ एक I think lights अगर बंद हम कर लें, and then we can open the gates to the thing. As I said, यहाँ पर आप लोगों के सामने आपने आपका बड़प्पन है कि, और वो बड़प्पन तो वैसे भी है कि आपने इस तरह का इंट्रोडक्शन दिया है. Otherwise, many of you have seen me over the years, and I have been gaining information from all of you. I remember एक और लाइट अगर कम हो जाए, अपनी माइक ऑफ हो जाएगा क्या? हाँ तो करिए, लाइट बंद कर दीजिए. माइक पास रख लेंगे, लाइटें आप और कम कर दो, वरना इसका आनंद नहीं आएगा. So over the years there would be conversations, random conversation, कहीं ऐसे ही मिल गए 10 मिनट के लिए, तो कोई बता रहा है कि we have the r speakers and the l speakers in Sanskrit. तो कुछ जैसे यूरोप में सॉल है सूर्य के लिए, यहाँ पे सूर्य है. All of those conversations have stayed with me. और आप लोगों के सामने बोलने में तो इसलिए भी झिझक है कि आप लोगों ने ये बहुत सारी चीज़ें देखी हुई हैं. You have ideas on them and many of you have written on them. So I want to start with something that is well known to you. That is Rajasthan. You've all either served here or been living here. And कुछ students भी हैं, तो you are not students but younger people who are discovering it for themselves. So just to recap, 47, yes, India is independent. ये सारे states अपना लिखते जाते हैं, treaties of accession. But present day Rajasthan came into being after 19 princely states and 2 chiefdoms who had already signed their individual instruments of accession, became part of what is today Rajasthan. थोड़ा सा facts हैं. November 56 में अजमेर, मेरवाड़ा, आबू तालुका कुछ और इसमें जुड़े हैं. And as you will have known, whichever capacity you were serving, so many of the district boundaries were remade. कुछ आप लोगों के समय में हुई, कुछ पहले ही आपको मिली विरासत में. But we were actually cutting into the way people were perceiving themselves. वो एक दूसरा टॉपिक है कि राजस्थान में क्या क्षेत्र के बारे में लोग अपने आप को क्या, अभी भी कई लोग कहते हैं हम हाड़ौती से हैं. हम मारवाड़ी नहीं बोलते, हम ढूंढारी बोलते हैं. एक्चुअली ढूंढारी बहुत कम लोग बोल रहे हैं. But one thing to keep in mind is, though we are water deficit at one level, we have made use of all the water we have, either by making sure that the rivers and lakes can be used to their optimum in the old days, or by making कुएं हैं, reservoirs हैं, step wells हैं, storage bodies, agricultural tanks. And since it has been recognized over the years that we need crafts, industries, everything needs water. So in a way you can say as much as the Thar desert. अच्छा, थार को कब थर पारकर के बजाय थार ही हमने कर दिया, I don't know, but in history we know it was थर पारकर. बुजुर्ग लोग कहते थे, even in my childhood, which was quite some time back. So water has shaped our culture, our cultural landscapes, and therefore very obviously our art and architecture and our intangible heritage. बचपन में ही कहीं पे सुना था कि घी गिरा दो डजंट मैटर, पर पानी का एक बूंद खून से भी ज़्यादा कीमती होता है. I mean they said it in a much nicer way than I am saying it. Sorry, I have to manage this. चलिए जी. So just a few shots. I'm not explaining these, but well, I am explaining these. पुष्कर 1950s on this side. उधर पेटा ऑफ द गढ़सीसर लेक, जिसको आजकल मॉडर्न डे अपभ्रंश हो गया है. Poor Raval Gadsi must be turning in his cenotaph. वो आजकल गढ़ीसर हो गया है, thanks to tourism, I don't know, or whoever. But गढ़ीसर का पेटा या गढ़सीसर का पेटा. इस तरफ nearer me is the Zawar zinc mine वाटर टैंक, और उस तरफ लोहागल है शेखावाटी का. दिस इज जस्ट टू ड्राइव होम द पॉइंट दैट वाटर हैज बीन एंड इज इम्पॉर्टेंट, except of course in the modern day we've got rid of most of these as water sources. और जो अपने शहरों की बावड़ियाँ हैं उनको तो कचरागाह बना दिया है, but that's okay, I'm skipping over these, but just to say कि प्री हिस्ट्री प्रोटो हिस्ट्री बहुत लंबी है, और इसमें we have within Rajasthan remains of the Harappan or the Sindhu Saraswati or the Indus Valley towards the north, northwest, Ahad culture towards the southeast, मतलब the Udaipur, Chittor, parts of Bhilwara, down towards Mandsaur in MP, and फिर शेखावाटी एरिया में the Ganeshwar Jodhpura culture. और सिर्फ कहना बाकी Iron Age, all of that, as I said, I'm not going to the history, but just to say these are some of the sites. इसके बाद एक spot quiz होगा, आपसे नाम पूछे जाएंगे. Kalibanga in 1960s. No, I was joking there. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you the names of something. तो इसमें आप पीछे देखेंगे very badly visible is the Ghaggar, the पुरानी हाकड़ा सरस्वती का हिस्सा में भी. और अगर आप लोगों ने अपने working time में ये देखा है तो this is more or less the same. It's probably more weathered. आहड़ कल्चर के साइट्स भी बहुत ज़्यादा हैं. आई हैड फाउंड ओवर 90 व्हेन आई वाज डूइंग माय पीएचडी एंड दैट वाज अ लॉन्ग टाइम अगो. तो अब तो और भी ज़्यादा होंगे, बट शायद और ज़्यादा इसलिए नहीं होंगे कि हमें जितनी साइट्स मिली हैं वी हैव बिल्ट ओवर देम. सो छोटी साइट्स मिलती हैं, दे हैव बीन प्लाउड अंडर. इनका क्या, बड़ी बड़ी इमारतें गायब हो जाती हैं. तो ये तो सो दिस पार्ट ऑफ आवर हेरिटेज इज प्रोबेबली लॉस्ट, but some of them remain in popular memory. ये जूनी शब्द ही आ जाता है, उससे ही आपको आइडिया हो जाता है. पलटो गांव से आइडिया हो जाता है. This is something at the site of Gilund, and I'm going to leave it there and carry on to the more visually appealing perhaps, क्योंकि यहाँ तो explanation चाहिए होता है. But just to drive home the point, जितना बड़ा ये OTS का कैंपस है, इससे कम क्षेत्र में a lot of copper tools are found. When I say a lot, 5,000 copper implements, some of which are depicted here in black and white, were found in a small area at Ganeshwar. ये अब म्यूजियम में है. और point is not कि मिले हैं. There is a river Kantli. How much with these fish hooks, how much fish would the local community have caught? Local community के पास क्या था? Huts. They're not built up like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro. So what are they doing? Okay, they've got arrowheads. कितने जानवरों का वो शिकार करेंगे? They've got these axes. So we are thinking of this as a step to understand what is going on. जो hypothesis है वो ये है कि the river Kantli, which would have been Kasumti, which goes up towards Anupgarh and parts of what is now Hanumangarh, Ganganagar, Sri Ganganagar, and on towards the site Kalibanga, further towards the Pakistan sites of the Harappan, that this is probably what went there. ये तो hypothesis है. So the late Dr. R.C. Agarwal, जो Department of Archaeology में थे, उन्होंने जब इसका टेस्ट करवाया, they found that this copper is 97% pure copper, which is what we have at Khetri. So this is Rajasthan copper, and this is found at various Harappan sites. Now I'm going to leave that there because I'm hoping कभी और मौका मिले किसी और मंच पे इसके बारे में आपसे बात करने का. But this is a way of human expression which might be functional because you need them. But still, how many and why? And then कई बार अपन बोल देते हैं, I've done it, कि ये पिछड़े, खासकर if you're doing आंकड़ा, you will say पिछड़ी जाति. What do we mean by that? Because by having these copper tools, they have the technology to make something. By choosing not to ape or replicate Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, they are expressing something else. Maybe they don't need high-rise buildings. Post-COVID, कितना नहीं सुन रहे, particularly about the US, where people are retiring to, not retiring, but people are choosing to live off the grid, minus electricity and all of that. So options are there, we need to consider them. और दिस इज अ पॉइंट, मैं थोड़ा रिहर्स एक पॉइंट को मैंने किया था बिकॉज आई वाज थिंकिंग ऑफ all of you and you've seen Rajasthan and what can I tell you. But one thing for someone like me who tries to understand history, one thing for me to gain from those of you who have been in service in whichever ways and those of you who have been teaching and my other colleagues here, what do? You are taught to understand उसके जितने भी पहलू हैं किसी चीज़ के and then synthesize them, summarize them. You are also taught something which a good historian should do, that just because somebody says ये सच्चा है, तो आपके सामने तो डाकू मंगल सिंह भी कहेगा जी मैंने तो ये कत्ल नहीं किया, but you have to take that call based on the evidence you have. So this is really what we need to do when we look at our art or architecture, which is actually telling us about past times. प्रॉब्लम ये आती है कि जितना हम पुराने चीज़ों में जाते हैं तो हमारी आर्कियोलॉजिकल एविडेंस कम है. As this site will tell you, around the time of say 300 BCE, आजकल BCE बोल देते हैं just to confuse us, but it's before Common Era, not before Christ, and AD has become CE for Common Era. And my question always is common to whom? Because जब आप विक्रम संवत बोल रहे हो, जब आप चाइनीज कैलेंडर यूज कर रहे हो, जब आप ग्रेगोरियन कैलेंडर यूज कर रहे हो, you have a point. When you say common, then you are actually not being globally friendly. You are actually demeaning those of us who have alternate calendars. But be that as it may, abhi bhed chal is for CE, but these are BCE. So roughly the Mauryan period to roughly the beginning of when the Gupta Empire starts to rise. We have these sole sites excavated in Rajasthan. आप राजस्थान को जानते हो, राजस्थान का दिस डजंट मीन कि बाकी एरियाज में कुछ नहीं है, बट दीज आर द हिस्टोरिकल पीरियड साइट्स. यस, Ahad has been partly excavated, several sites have been partly excavated, but this is where some of our architectural remains come from. तो बैराट का ये बुद्धिस्ट स्तूप है. Inscription found here, which is now in Calcutta, says that in the 13th year of his reign, Ashok visited this place. So whether it is you people preparing for VVIP visits, VVIPs visit when something is important. चाहे वहाँ कुछ प्लांट है, चाहे वहाँ कुछ रिलीजियस सिग्निफिकेंस है, चाहे कुछ भी आपको, यू मेकिंग अ स्टेटमेंट. By coming here and by putting an inscription, which is the Bairat inscription, technically better known as the Bairat Bhabru rock inscription, now with the Royal Asiatic Society of India in Kolkata. इसमें जो साइड का है, you know, if you look around you, you have an idea of the Buddhist site being up there. And as a younger student, I thought कि ठीक है, ये एक site है, ये एक. But then you realize, like you see the building, the area beneath you, cities would have been in places like this. ज़्यादातर मंदिर दूर होते थे. अच्छा, monastery में तो Buddhist monks हैं. So whether it's a Buddhist monastery or anywhere else where you have monks, they will be away from habitation. So what happens to the rest of the city? Most of the rest of the cities are buried beneath our current cities. And we need to think of that accordingly. But just to give you an idea, these are the cells of the habitation of the monks, छोटे छोटे. और इन्हीं पत्थरों में वो जिसको ये कहते थे बीजक की पहाड़ी, because the Bijak was a lost map. And when they found the Ashokan Brahmi Bairat inscription, because the local people could not read it, so they just said ये बीजक की पहाड़ी है, इस पे बीजक है, इसको जो पढ़ेगा उसको lost treasures मिल जाएंगे. And of course everyone would not mind finding the lost treasure, but actually this was the treasure. But just to continue, what do we know about this kind of architecture? So very briefly, you see, pottery मिलती है, आप लोग के म्यूजियम में आप जाओ, you walk past all the old stone tools, you walk past all the beads and pottery and everything. Next time, do think of the fact that that bead there would have been worn by someone. So it's not just a piece of stone, somebody touched it, somebody's used it. But that needs a little more imagination. The point is, very early on, जो material है आपने उसकी pottery बना ली. So Harappa and Mohenjo-daro and Kalibanga have both unbaked brick, like we see around us, and baked brick. और वो kilns आज की तारीख में भी हैं. But it is the measurement that tells you that this is a Kushan period or this is Harappan because of the size. Or for that matter, for those of you who know Punjab and UP, वहाँ clay ज़्यादा है, राजस्थान में पत्थर का use होता है. So the clay becomes good brick, and when you go to places like across UP but all the way up to Lahore, Lakhori bricks की बात आती है, which have a certain scale. Those become, as I said, ways of knowing what was going on. I'm going to speed up, otherwise you'll just be looking at the old stuff. ये है, that lady on the other side is a small yakshini. She is this size. ये हमारे Department of Archaeology के पास है, Mauryan period. Please notice the turban, because you notice that headwears have changed over time. And West Africa used a lot of similar headwear. There's no connection that I'm pointing at this point. Just saying that their costumes have changed, or have they? I will show you a few more images in a minute. Upar is what is called a punch mark coin in copper. And they will have some symbols that you can recognize. There is, right on top, there is a sun, like a kid would make, बीच में गोला and then the rays. And then जैसे कि स्कूल में बनाते हैं बच्चे, and you would have all done it. I don't know where we got it from. You have 3 hills, you know, and you tell a child to draw something, they'll make the 3 hills, they'll make a hut, they'll make a sun behind it, and then there'll be a river that comes this way. I don't know वो हमारे DNA में है या schools में सिखाया है कि क्या है, but everybody does that. Everybody. But below that, we have these 2 gold coins from Bayana near Bharatpur. They are of the Gupta period, and don't please, I will lose the quiz if you ask me Samudragupta का कौन सा है और Chandragupta Vikramaditya का कौन सा है, but one is the other. If there is anyone better at numismatics, not better, worst in numismatics, they can actually read it. But point is, Gupta Empire is influencing this part. The Mauryan Empire is, the 16 Mahajanpads are obviously there because Berat is one of the capitals of that period. Matsya ka capital hai. These coins mean that Rajasthan would have had affluence, because there's a hoard of gold coins that have been found. So people don't normally lose. You know, ab to theek hai sikka gir jata hai, it has no value. But otherwise they would always be picking up a coin that had dropped. You would not drop a gold coin, but you would certainly bury them if there was an attack or invasion. So these are extrapolations that one can make, but it gives us an idea of the art of that period. And this actually, if you think of it, is not like the art you associate with Rajasthan, the coins. However, we also have this. Please, while I am looking at this, spot the lion or tiger down there. Spot the headdress. ये assume करा गया, this is in China clay, white China clay, सांबर के पास मिली है. She is assumed to be an early form of Mahishasur Mardini. So now that I've said it, look at what is emerging from near her hand. It's the head of the buffalo, and her Singhasan is there. And if you think this is far-fetched, that's your thing, but you will see another image of the more classically known Mahishasur Mardini in a little while. Why am I pointing these out? That our very early art is these plastic arts that have survived. And what happens, हम लोग अभी बात भी कर रहे थे before we formally started. You know, sites where old stone was found and they just ran road rollers over it to make the road. Things like that. We know that when Harappa was discovered, a lot of the bricks had already been used to make the base for the rail tracks that were being done. So we've lost a lot of these. Now when you find these, the average person will say, "Ya to thikro hai, kahin karne hai thikro ra." You know, but those thikras are actually pointing out to something else. So they are part of our heritage. Then if you find something like this, you might say, "Andir mein rakh do," and then nobody can study it. But if you find something else, like a simpler toy, like a child's toy that you can see in a museum or on the streets of Jaipur, then very few people will even try to date it. So this is my spiel now, or my time for saying, in a country the size of India, we have 4,700 nationally protected monuments, ASI protected monuments. This is a country the size of India. We have less than 5,000 monuments nationally protected. Okay, so far so good. About that many more protected by the various state departments, or by under Devastan or Waqf, or maybe even the cantonments which are now going. So let us say 10,000, usko aap thoda बढ़ा भी लो, तो 15,000 protected monuments in a country the size of India. Most of these are not. This one is, ye Chittor ke paas. There's a building behind there to give you an idea of the size. This is the so-called Hatibada of Akbar, and it is so called because actually this was made in about 300 BCE. और ये इतने बड़े-बड़े पत्थरों को balance करना, you know, we talk about the Egyptian pyramids. Yes, they are grander, but that also requires skill of engineering, of putting them one on top of another. Here, to have stone masonry, these huge bricks, these huge stones, is no less a feat. But ऐसी कितनी इमारतें होंगी across the country which still need to be, you know, talked about. Protection is not necessarily the only thing. As you were saying, you know, you'll have one chowkidar somewhere, आपने बोला. That doesn't help. What can help is that there is now a mood across the country for our heritage. And people like you can maybe come together and become an advisory body and help the younger people explore the country in a proper way. Not कि भाई आप treasure hunting वाले वो लेके निकल गए and destroy everything. A famous archaeologist once dug through a cave, went through all the things to get to the, he wanted to know what was right at the bottom, which is fine. तो literally जैसे होता ना फावड़ा लेके पाके पीछे अपने फेंक दिया. So you've disturbed the evidence. The plastic arts, the terracottas. So the Huns are known in Rajasthan, I believe. I've said it in my book, so if it is not wrong, someone can correct me. But 36 Rajput कुलों में Hun का भी नाम आता है. And a lot of people would say if they had a particularly angry child in their family, they would say, ये हमारे घर में Hun कहाँ से पैदा हो गया? So at some point, the Huns were attacking and destroying buildings and places, and in northern Rajasthan what they attacked were some of the Buddhist vihars, and in that process the clay got burnt and you have these terracotta plaques. And what do these terracotta, all of them are in the Bikaner Museum, so if you've not had a chance to see it, आजकल online बहुत आता है, and we'll make sure that we can have more of these. But this figure which looks like something out of Harry Potter is actually called Aj Ekpad. Aj is goat head, which there is. Ek pair, which is an elephant foot. And this seems to be, according again to R.C. Agarwal, this seems to be the only such representation in art, because ये किसी ऋग्वेदिक श्लोक में mentioned है. Otherwise, we don't have a image of this. On the other side, you have something that could be partly Gandharan, but it's from Rajasthan. And then you have Uma Maheshwar sitting, and he's in his usual, Shivji is in his usual cross-legged, but she's sitting like almost like a Greek. You know, the flow of the clothes are not very typical of what you would have, say, around Mathura or other places. And I have a lot of these which I will go through, just giving you an idea. These are tiny, these are terracotta pieces. These are, because of the destruction, they have been protected. That is supposed to be the Vaman avatar, but that is our interpretation. But as I said, you can see here the ladies' clothes are very, very Greek looking. So this is that time period where there is a mixture happening. And then that mixture, so instead of just having terracotta, stone begins to be used much more. Now stone has been used. School books always had the male figure from Harappa, and the female bronze dancing girl, and a few others. Again, it's surprising. Out of all these sites, यही मिला. इससे ज़्यादा नहीं मिले. We know that they say that probably the Harappans were not big on plastic arts and everything, but still maybe more needs to be done. But we do have enough stone and enough carvings on stone once we get to the Gupta and post-Gupta period. I've not got enough images here to show you, but Kushan period ke shivling hai. They're all, actually we can do a walkthrough one day. Maybe Rakshit's JVF can do it through the Albert Hall Museum, which has a fantastic collection of sculpture. So that will give us a great idea thing of what is going on. But besides the Kushan period, by the later Gupta period, ये जगत का मंदिर है near Hindustan Zinc, where it used to be, near that area. It's the same temple, 4 different images, which is one of the earliest known surviving ones. There may have been 1 million for all we know, but there are not that many surviving. So you see a lower, relatively chota shikhar, chota temple, chota everything, chota mandap. All views of the same one, so I'm not going to stress the point. But this also gives you an idea of how much more Rajasthan was doing with stone. So the Toda Rai Singh Hathi with the hut behind it gives you an idea of scale. The 3 below, I don't know आप में से कितनों की posting Abu और Achalgarh हुई है. And the story goes that these 3 buffaloes used to turn, they were Rakshas, they used to come as buffaloes, drink up all the water. So King Dharavarsh's brother Praladan hid, or maybe King Dharavash did. Ek teer se, you'll notice there are these, there's a round hole which you can see in the middle one. So ek teer se तीनों का वध किया, and erected these in honor. Now the story could actually have happened way back. So it could have been a story that is immortalized. Much like we put up a statue to Maharana Pratap or Prithviraj Chauhan today. Not that the statue is already there, but that's my conjecture. However, up on my left, top left, is a Saraswati, a Jain Saraswati in marble. इसकी एक कॉपी नेशनल म्यूजियम दिल्ली में है और दूसरी कॉपी बीकानेर म्यूजियम में है. And she was found at Pallu and is a very famous piece because it is rare. वही है ना एक बात और आज ही सुबह हुई, how are you valuing places? So देखने वाले की नज़र है. And today someone can value something else over it, but it continues to be one of the fine pieces of Rajasthan and of the country. And below is a piece from Abaneri, and that is the Mahishasur Mardani you would normally associate, where if you look somewhere back there, you'll see the tiny head of the शेर peeping out. मैं lion tiger दोनों नहीं कह रही हूँ अंग्रेजी में, because we don't know which is being used as her mount. Usually it's the striped tiger, but also the lion, क्योंकि कई बार main दिखता है. But anyway, you can see that little head peeping out. So Abaneri is near Jaipur and is one of the many sites that one can see. But Abaneri also has a stepwell, and I think I will have an image of the stepwell very soon. But before I do, these are some more of the temples from Barmer, Bhandevra, Abaneri also, to give you an idea of how from the smaller shikhar and a relatively small temple, you start expanding, and that is what we see here. So a general thumb rule, which is not 100%, nothing is ever 100%, is the simpler something is, the older it could be. But take that with not just a pinch, take that with a sack full of salt, because that may not be the case. However, we will find as I go along with these that some of the Jain temples from the Delwada Wale are so elaborate and they are closer to our time. So the plainer ones are away from our time. Sun Temple, Jhalra Patan, Sahasrabahu, or the Sas Bahu as they used to call it at Nagra. These will give you, that is an earlier period, this is 16th century. So again, that point I'm making कि छोटा है, शिखर छोटा है, मंडप छोटा है. For anyone interested, that is a typical Gurjar Pratihar style, which doesn't mean that a Gurjar Pratihar manual went around and everybody made things accordingly. It's a court style that is being practiced, and then people travel, masons travel, much like somebody making a modern day house can move from even cities to another city. I know of the people from Cooch Behar who are now working building bridges in Chennai. And in the old days it would not have been so dramatic, but certainly courts would have attracted a lot of renowned poets, renowned artists. So we have a pan-India culture, and then we have a local specialized regional aspect to it, which you see in Jhalra Patan, जहाँ की राजस्थान के ज़्यादा columns and chajjas, even our Bangladar roof is coming in there, and the shikhar gets higher. So 16th century and about 8th, 9th century. Nagda 8th, 9th, Jhalra Patan later. Jhalra Patan is more or less the same time as the Jagat Chiromani at Amer. I really need to get different images. And the ones below, the Ahad one from Mahasatya is an earlier period, as is the Chandrabhaga one. And do notice one of the things is the smaller, shorter columns are what we have around the 10th century, and we don't have the true arch, which also comes in later, but that doesn't mean we can't make something that looks like an arch. Abaneri. And I think here's when I went slightly mad. I've thrown in a few more, so I'm going to go through these. Bundi. And just thinking back to the Chandrabhaga pillars, you'll see at Adhai Din Ka Jhopda how the three pillars, one on top of another, are creating the height that is required. So the thing to remember is, बनाने वाले हाथ तो लोकल होते हैं, उनको आप आइडिया देते हो कि वहाँ पे मैंने वो चीज़ देखी है, वो बनाओ. And here, if something is being done rapidly, this is how it's done rapidly. You take the remains of what is there, which is why some parts of the Sanskrit, it is assumed to have been a Sanskrit college, are in the building itself. But a major part of the actual panels are now in the Ajmer Museum. They've renamed it, I think. Bhanavji, you would have been there when I think they've started work on the Ajmer Fort Museum, as it's called. पहले शायद तुम उसको मैगजीन ही बोलते थे, दौलत खाना बोलते थे, all of that. So Akbar Fort. So again, now at one point this is a part of Rajasthan's history. At another point, it's also a lesson of how reuse has happened over time in other gentler ways also. So 8th century temples at Chittor were added to, not destroyed, but were remodeled by the famous Rana Kumbha in the 15th century. So, those kind of changes happen. Sometimes dramatic, destructive, sometimes creative, using destroyed material, and it's part of what we have and part of what we show and need to rationalize to ourselves, and maybe not go down the way of knocking it down just because. My point about the more elaborate it is, the closer to our time. So the Delwara temples, Vimala or which were made by the ministers. Now, this is again one example, one of the many examples. Jaisalmer is full of temples. Patthar farak hai, so the end result can be something else. If you're using marble, you can have finer work. If you're using the yellow stone, you can have finer work. If you're using the harder red sandstone from the Dholpur area, then you have elaborate buildings, but you don't have that plasticity in your patthar. So you work accordingly. तो आपके पास जो है आप वो करते हो या करते थे. मैं तो ये भी नहीं कर सकती. Again, the compliment to my mother's thing. I wish I was an artist, but second best, I can at least talk about this. Now, again, I never thought about this very much as a child because one just saw this. I think I was 9 when my father got posted to Chittor. So looking at these every now and then, you think it's there. बाद में ये सोचा कि it is not really a tradition to have these stumps which you can actually walk through. Across Rajasthan, across India भी ऐसा परंपरा नहीं है. हैं, गिनती के हैं. You know, Gujarat in what is that place with the sea near Ahmedabad? नहीं, it's that Champaner. Champaner में एक दो जगह है जहां आप अंदर जा सकते हो. But by and large, how many towers are there? Qutub Minar, yes, but it's not like this. But even if we count Qutub Minar, how many towers across India are the sort where you walk through? So there are few. How many in Rajasthan? But we have 2 at Chittor. We have the Kirti Stham and then we have, it will be there later, the Vijay Stham. और ये earlier है, ये आदिनाथ ऋषभ देव जी का temple है, so this is the Jain one. And I certainly will not fit through it now, but as a child, and I think they don't allow us now, it's World Heritage, but I have been allowed to go through, it was some time ago, and until it became World Heritage, Vijay Stham also people could go through. For that matter, the Qutub Minar, all of which is now not possible. Forts is something that we think about when we think of Rajasthan. But I did show you that image of just the plain stones, the Hathibada, so-called Hathibada. वो भी हमारा architecture है, लेकिन इसको आप ज़्यादा associate करते हो with Rajasthan. And so let's look at several of these. Bhatner, the left towards me, Gagron away from me, Taragarh Ajmer towards me, water structure at Jalore away from me, but I have more. So these forts, they have strong bastions, they have fortification walls, and the approach is difficult. This earlier forts are of the time where you actually needed to get to the fort to attack it. So at one level, if you think of it, once you have cannons, then the game changes. Then you can be at another height. So that famous story कि अकबर ने एक सोने की मोहर देके एक नकली मोहर मगरी बनवाई, नकली in the sense it was artificially created, and he put his cannon on top so he could fire at the fort. But in the earlier period there weren't such cannons, so you actually had to get there. And therefore the height of your wall, even if your city wall, the strength of your city wall or your fort wall mattered. And in Rajasthan, they represent our regional defense-related architecture. And we have to also remember that these are not just defense. There is habitation within them, not since only the Raja's Mahal or Kuvarpada Mahal or things, but they're also trade centers. Trade center, that is why the Kirti Stham is built. The trade is going through the safety of the fort of Chittor. इसके साथ I'm not showing images because I'm taking enough of your time, but Rajasthan is full of lots of gadis and lots of garrison forts. For that matter, Jaigarh is a garrison fort, क्योंकि मेन तो आमेर में रह रहे हैं, रिहायशी इलाका है, ऊपर है कि कभी ज़रूरत पड़े तो वहाँ से आप शेल्टर भी ले सकते हो, but you can also attack from there. But Lakshmangarh, if you think of Sikar and that area, so Lakshmangarh is more of a garrison fort. For that matter, so is Moti Dungri. Moti Dungri, Hatroi, Amagarh, Nahargarh, Jaigarh, all of these, once Amer is no longer the capital, then instead of trying to protect Amer with a lot of fortification walls, you need to protect Jaipur, which is in the valley, by making sure these forts are there. So, jo us taraf hai towards Delhi, those are the higher, stronger ones. Amagarh, because it again the road to Agra. But what happens, Moti Dungri or Shankargarh as it used to be, is towards part of Dhundar. It's a safer area. You don't need to protect so much, but you still have a fort ki zarurat pade to wahan se. The same with Hatroi. And for that matter, Sanganer would have been one of the outposts. So if there is an attack, then you have enough of a circle around you. This is an example but applies almost everywhere. But like with Amer, like with Kumbhalgarh, forts, larger forts would have had palaces within them, the Ranvas, the Raja ka area. The main height would be, or the center, either way. Like the Jaipur, there is no height once Jaipur is built. So the city palace is in the middle. If you are attacking, you have to go through the outer areas and then get to the inner citadel. Lots of wells, water structures. Kumbhalgarh again, they are doing farming there. Granaries are important. Most of the Rajasthan stories are 1 saal, 2 saal, 3 saal siege chala, until either the water or the grain store was polluted or they ran out of it. It was only after that that the people would put on the kesariya, safa and go out, fight to the end. But there were also the mansions of the traders and the rich people and the poor people, and the stables for horses and elephants, and the arsenal, shrines, all of this. So just to give you an idea, the height going up to Sivana, and on the far side, up and below, above and below, Merta, Malkot, made by Rao Maldev. Again, sort of cannons are coming, guns are coming, but this is pre-cannon. So height and strength is what you need. And then, of course, our famous, the 6 World Heritage Site forts. Gagron, Ranthambore. If we are talking of categorization, then Chittor is a plateau fort. And actually it is, it's isolated from its neighbors. So once it was near falling, you couldn't get support from any nearby place. It would be isolated. And that is why eventually the Mewar capital moves towards the hills, the mountain of the Aravalli thing. And there is more security for Udaipur also, more security for Gogunda, Kumbhalgarh, all of that. In the case of Gagron, there's water on 3 sides, 2 nadiyan hain. And surprisingly, the 4th side has a very small, it now looks like a Ganga Nala channel, but they had made it, I think, way back in the 12th century, whenever Bijal Dev was doing the fort. Ranthambore is classified as a forest fort in the sense that your one also gives you security. So whoever comes through this is already fighting the enemy in the form of the natural terrain. Jaisalmer is different, and that's why it got part of the basket of hill forts, because it is in the middle of a desert, and now you see how much the modern habitation is. Otherwise everything was within the fort. 99 bastions, 99 burj. Water was precious. A lot of the damage that has been caused is because buildings inside, which became hotels, are using water which is then flowing down the side of the hill. But that is a different matter, and more a matter of how can we make sure these sites or these artworks are properly protected and managed. Kumbhalgarh, a site of that famous wall is also there. More of the famous wall. Sabse upar Sajangarh. And all the things we read about, that 8 horses could go on the ramparts, and it's got a great view and everything. Well, it was built for more than a view. It was an impregnable fortress. एक बार occupy हुआ है when apparently the arsenal blew up, so there was entry to the Mughals from that side. But by that time, Maharana Pratap was no longer within Kumbhalgarh, so could carry on the battle from elsewhere. So now, not everything is put at World Heritage, not everything needs to be put at World Heritage, but it is still our heritage and worthy of comment and protection and admiration. One difference is Mehrangarh is not a garrison fort at all. It is if you can call it a Rihaishi fort, that's what it is the palace, and everything else is below it. So that's something quite unique in itself. And then a whole lot of others. Mandalgarh, Sivana, Shergarh, Jalore. Sorry, I'm peering to read this. Achalgarh, Basantgarh, Niche Bundi. More of Bundi. Udaipur. Bhaisrodgarh. I think the buildings have been repaired now. Most places have turned into hotels, so there's a good side to it. The only problem would be to make sure, or the only cautionary tale, कि wherever repairs are happening, it should be in the traditional material and it should be done sensitively. And you don't just put a cement structure, because that's not going to last. Chuna gara, ये सब हमारे चल गया है. It has a longer life than the 50 or 100 years of cement. But the point is they're incompatible. So if you're having a cement building, have a brand new one. Make a brand new film city. Put everything in there, in modern material. Don't break what exists. Again, more of Shergarh, Bara. Bhavargarh का मेरे पास नहीं है. Alwar, Bharatpur, Bayana, Nagaur, Bhatner, part of now Hanumangarh, because it was occupied in the 19th century on that day. Within Chittor jo baat thi that there are palaces and all within, so some images, so-called Fatta Mahal, so-called Kumbha Mahal, so-called Rani Padmini ka Mahal, except that Giles Tillotson wrote somewhere that whatever was originally there was remodeled by Maharana Sajjan Singh Ji in the 19th century. So even if this is an older site, the current building is not from the 13th or 14th or whatever century. Of course, the Vijay Stambh. अच्छा, आर्ट ट्रेडिशंस बहुत हैं, सांझी का भी है, बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं. वी आर नॉट गोइंग डाउन दैट रोड, बट इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट टू रिकग्नाइज द डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ आर्ट एंड द डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ पॉटरी. अलवर साइड के, थानागाजी साइड के ऊपर कागजी पॉटरी होती है. द गोडवार एरिया हैज़ गॉट दैट वेरी फाइन वाइट ऑलमोस्ट pots which keep your water cold. We had one somewhere, I don't know where it got. The painting tradition, which also I'm not going into in detail, but this would not have been available to the people at large. People at large would have had other forms. These would have been, because of the gold work and others, restricted to the well-off, to palaces, to nobles, to anyone who was gifted something like this for any act of valor. Usually आपके कवियों को आप पेंटिंग्स नहीं देते थे, कुछ और ही देते थे, but be that as it may, art within palaces is something else. This is a lot of gold work here, but when that artwork is not available, when that chuna is off. This is Timangarh. This is a fort of the Yaduvanshis who made, Tahanpal made Timangarh or Tawagarh, and it was later on sacked, and this is one of the gates. So the same thing minus the outer embellishment, this is what it becomes. And half the time people look at this and say, ये तो जर्जर हो गया, इसको तो गिरा दो. No, I mean, obviously आप लोग ने protect किया है. That is, I think I'd left out the Amer Jaigarh part, so here we are. We can't leave out Amer, Jaigarh, Jaipur if we need to live here. I can go back there for a minute. And Intact will know also the work that Intact has been doing here. Ajmer is an old site. Harbilas Sharda ji wrote a lot on it. And Ajmer was also an old site from the time when Ajay Raj founded it. I mean, there are so many things of exactly when it was founded, but Ajay Meru has been around. whether it is just the fort on top of the hill or the habitation below. Keep in mind that जहाँ भी ऊपर fort होता है, वो जो जिसको आप लोग अतिक्रमण के हिसाब से आपके सामने चीजें आती थी, there are always habitations which come up. You know, you make a new road and there will be something along the strip. So the habitation was there even back then. They talk about it. There is a Prithipura around old Ajmer fort that is being talked about. But once Ajmer becomes a settled large city, more and more buildings are there. They get built up, they get destroyed, they get added to. So you have the famous Dargah, where the dome was apparently presented by Akbar, and you have the Akbari mosque, the fort, which is, if you think, जिन्होंने देखा है as a magazine, वो अलग बात है, but otherwise this, the Agra fort, the Red Fort at Delhi and the Red Fort at the Lahore fort, they are using the same kind of stone and the same kind of technique, and you have the same, which is not surprising, because when you have an empire, you build a kind of pan-Indian style. But this was originally the Daulat Khana Mahal, and somewhere here is, and I like to tell that tale because I think it's a little tragic, somewhere here is where Dara Shikoh was born, and somewhere here is where the family would visit every now and then. But Daurai is not far from Ajmer, and Daurai is where Dara was defeated and then brought in chains to the same Ajmer. Jahan, you know, when he was born, all the dhol tashas would have played because he was the firstborn son of the prince at that time. His grandfather was alive, and he's taken in chains, and you know, that's the end of his life and career. But the same style is then being used. The famous Mughal gateway made by Raja Man Singh of Amer in the Alwar area. It doesn't look quite like this now. The channel is lost and the Jain structure is there. There is also a head of Akbar relief in here, and there is painting of not just the geometrical, but there are some Radha Krishna images in the chhatris above it. So these are the blends of style that over time keep coming to Rajasthan, that I'm skimming through. But we also have things on the wall. We have the murals, we have the wall paintings, and these are, all three are from the city palace part, but the city palace part that is now with the government of Rajasthan in their government museum. So the elephant fight, of course, and that one is Maharana Sangram Singh with the nimbus around him. And yes, you need to have the gold paintings, you need to be rich, but, and to have the Sheesh Mahal and the Junagadh at Sheesh Mahal at Amer, the gold work at Bikaner, the other painted one of paint and stucco and thing at Mehrangarh, Jodhpur, and then below that is Jaisalmer, 1987, the year that they had rain again after a long gap, and that is the hut in which she's just used cow dung and whitewash and bits of glass to tidy up that kitchen part of her house, that far end. So my point here is, you make something beautiful using what you have, like putting mandna on a hut or putting something on the floor. The art and architecture has sometimes been functional, and you make do with what you have, even if your resources are low. I think that is the point I was getting at there. Some more paintings, I think I have two here. This is from the City Palace Museum, and so is this. This is taking baby Krishna across, Jamuna ji ko par kar rahe hain. But then we have other structures, and I'm almost at the end, so thank you for your patience, in Jaipur city itself, which you might have seen if you were doing your rounds of the city for any particular reason. Ye Baramori, it's an aqueduct bringing water in, and this is the condition it's in actually. Any other place, it could be a good tourist attraction. Basically, all it needs is a bit of cleaning up beneath and above. And then other structures around, we couldn't not have something from Tonk, but the Sunehri Kothi and the old municipality building. Almost through forms of art. So, Koftgiri, all of this work. This is a helmet, also at the City Palace Museum. Swords across Rajasthan. We've now put our collections. Pehle they would be alag states ke apne apne museum the. I think at some point the Department of Archaeology has restructured its museums. So they've put them theme wise. They've got coins somewhere, they've got weapons somewhere. But this is an example of our swords with gold work. Dhal. Which had Savai Pratap Singh ke time ki, the one who made Hawa Mahal. Some of our structures of the 18th, 19th century. And just to say what survives and what doesn't. So the famous Maharaja Ganga Singh, who lived till 1943, this is from 1887, which would be the year he became the Maharaja, and it's his seal, and this is the cloth which has survived with it. Okay, at the end with this, I want to just bring it back to, again, to all of you for inviting me, because you've all worked in the making of present-day Rajasthan. And we need to also remember how difficult that process must have been immediately after the Indian states became independent of each other, but became part of India and then became part of modern-day Rajasthan. Because the Chief Justice of a state of Rajasthan, of erstwhile Rajputana, was probably no longer required now. The Prime Minister would be somebody else. You know, we have Chief Ministers, you don't have those, Divans. The military commander, some of the army men who had gone out to the Second World War, fought Rommel. When they came back, their eyes were not of the level that was acceptable for the new Indian army, because trachoma and all. So they get invalided out. But along with that, it's people, aap log jaise administration mein baith ke, you have to make sense out of the masses of papers around. You had to make something common for the administration of the new state. And as part of that, we needed the integration of the administration, the judiciary, finances, the various armed forces, all of that. And with it, you had the new legislative assembly come in. So you also had land reforms, you have Jagirdari being abolished, you have Panchayati Raj coming in. And then the last is all the things that you worked on and probably had time to look at some of these art and architectural beauties as you did your daily routine work or didn't. So I'm hoping I've been able to show some of them to you, and that I've managed to live up to some of the hopes you might have had from this session. Once again, thank you for having me here. Open for questions if I have not. I think I have one little, but I don't need to really talk about it. Even, you know, today we have a lot of this about Rajasthani is not a language and it's a sab boli hai dialect. Fine, okay. But all these states had weights and measures that were different. They even had a different financial calendar. None of which was 31st March to, or rather 1st April to 31st March. Coinage were different. All of that being put together is what, from this early work on the Rajasthan Canal and this work on Rawat Bhata, is the Rajasthan that you have all seen and you have all created. So I think finally this is the goodbye from me, and I'm open for questions. Light jala dete hain. And I know I've overshot my time, but जी सर.
Now let's take question and
माइक.
please.
हाँ. नहीं, आई थिंक माइक वुड बी बेटर बिकॉज वो पीछे तक शायद आवाज नहीं जाए. हाँ.
मेरा प्रश्न, जितने किले राजस्थान में है शायद हिंदुस्तान के किसी भी प्रांत में नहीं होंगे. ये राजस्थान जहाँ पे मरुभूमि थी, इतनी प्रॉस्पेरिटी नहीं थी. What's the reason that there are too many forts? Was they for vanity or they for defense? If they were for defense, then why were the international war and conflicts of war taking place between different princes who were there at that time? Thank you.
I think there are forts everywhere. Some have survived, some have not. For example, within Rajasthan, people go to Tannot Mata. But Tannot was a famous fort at one time, which was destroyed pre-Islamic thing even by infighting. So people have been fighting, and the Punjab area had a lot of forts, which probably, you see, each time you win over a fort, you have to make it unusable for someone else. The difference is with the Maratha forts, which are now up for UNESCO nomination. There are lots of them. The earlier ones have been reused by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Some of them are the bordering, like cluster forts. And what they would do when the Mughal armies were attacking, which was different to what they did prior to that, prior to, when the Deccan Sultanates were there. When the Mughals would be there and it looked like you could not hold the fort, तो वो किला छोड़ देते थे. उनके पास कई रास्ते थे निकलने के, और वो उनको मालूम है कि यहाँ से पन्हाला से निकलेंगे तो विशालगढ़ चले जाएंगे, और रास्ते में वो अपन तो बोलते हैं करौंदा, वो कवरुंदी ऐसा कुछ बोलते हैं इन मराठी. दे न्यू व्हाट टू ईट ऑन द वे. दे हैड देयर सीक्रेट पाथ्स. मुगल बड़े खुश होके, और ज़्यादातर उनमें राजस्थान के सिपह सालार होते थे. They would take over the fort, they would repair it, they would be all set. अब winter आ रहा है, monsoon आ रहा है, monsoon तो वो धड़-धड़ the tap would be turned on. That is when the Marathas would fight and take it back, or just wait till these people would say कि यहाँ तो there is peace, so let us abandon this fort and then take it over. So there's up mic with me.
My question is, how much does these citizens and the government value our heritage? One example which bothers me every time is Albert Museum is such a beautiful sight, and behind that is a monstrosity which is coming up. If this is how we are going to protect our heritage, what will be the result in the years to come? And why is it that they don't take on board some well-known historians or people who have an aesthetic sense while sanctioning such projects?
So I think one of the issues is a very warped notion of what development and modernization means. We don't see what fits in, what is compatible with what. In the case of this monstrosity coming up in the hospital, I remember during COVID there was an image of this in a page in Arbit. Arbit has an English section to the Hindi Rashtradoot. So they showed what it would look like. And I remember there were a couple of meetings where I was holding this out. Those days we were just mastering how to use online things. That this is what it will look like. And I think because it was not there, it wasn't making an impact. But yes, actually, rather than historians or others who will not be listened to, it should be people like you, people in your organization, people with all the experience you have, to come together as a group and become an advisory committee. And say that, because I am very serious when I say Jaipur will lose its World Heritage status, because we have changed what is the world city is what's protected. Within it, हमने बस कितना वो जयपुर कॉलेज और क्या क्या वो सब तोड़ दिया है. So just having a facade is not enough. And if we don't want it, you don't have to. They don't have to force, UNESCO doesn't have to force a World Heritage tag onto us if we don't want it. If it's affecting our life, let's do without it. Let's make everything 51 stories high, and it can all fall. But seriously, something has to be done, and I think you are still able to make more of an impact than the likes of the rest of us. Even Intact by itself needs support. That's my response to you, sir.
Why has Buddhism not get any impact on Rajasthan art and architecture, Buddhism? Because you are spoken about one area of monks, but that is the only thing.
So actually, the area directly held by the Mughals was the city of Ajmer, because that was the capital of the Suba. And then all around it, you have something which is notionally part of the Mughal Empire. So if you were to draw a map, then even Amer is. No, but within it is the Watan Jagir. So Jodhpur is the Watan Jagir, Amer is the Watan Jagir, Bikaner, all of these are the Watan Jagirs of people serving the Mughals, where the architecture can be a blend, but where the Mughals are not going to spend. It's again, very simply, it's a state list and center list. Now,
Impact of Buddhism.
impact of Buddhism is there. It's overlain. I thought you said the Mughals, but nahi. Buddhism is around even that, which is that Chhatri idhar ki taraf apne Dausa ki taraf jo hai. There is a lot of influence of Buddhism which over time gets lost to us, including the Jhalawar forts, Jhalawar caves, Kolia and other places. These early ones are the stoops which get destroyed over time. And once, I'm not sure if we are active even up to the point where Bakhtiyar Kaki is destroying the vihars in modern day Bihar. I think by then Jainism is more important across Rajasthan.
After Ashoka, the Guptas came later on. Most these Guptas, these so-called Hindus, they started destroying the Buddhism structures or the impact of Buddhism, monasteries and others. Now, all this happening in Rajasthan as well.
This happened in Rajasthan as well, but it didn't need too much physical destruction because that Pushyamitra Sung period is very short. You know, the what they say, the Brahmanical revival or whatever it is. It's what I would call in general talks, the Empire Strikes Back. So the Empire strikes back, and there is much more of stone-built temples, other structures, which are emphasizing the mainstream religion, Brahmanical religion. Also what is happening is incorporation of lots and lots of local gods and goddesses into that. So across Rajasthan you have a lot of forests where you will have Mahadev and Baba and a forest which is protected, and you have lots of deities which are forms of one Devis, thank you, forms of one Devis which then become part of the goddess, the great goddess. Buddhism loses its patronage. To survive, it doesn't have the patronage, but it's not physically destroyed, which is why I said Jhalawar caves are about the 7th century.
I know Jhalawar.
Of course you do. That's why I said Kolia and something with a B.
Connected with this only.
Haan.
See, Afghanistan has so many Buddhist structures, and it went from here only to Afghanistan. Why Rajasthan doesn't have as many as Afghanistan has?
Afghanistan was everything. Afghanistan is actually almost the heartland. So one does lots of things as a student. You know, you feel you should be reading this book and everything, and even nahi padha hai to pheko amongst your peer group. So at one point I started to read Fayan's, the Beale translation of Fayan's Travels to India, whatever it's called. I left it eventually, it was too like, it was not boring, it was just too difficult. But what I do remember is at one point Fayan says, now I'm entering the gateway to India, and he's somewhere in Central Asia. And then he gets to the Afghanistan area and he says, I'm in India. And then he gets near Peshawar and he says, I'm entering Middle India. Now, for me, somewhere here I've got a translation. No, I think it was somewhere. So if you say Central India, Middle India, we think of Madhya Pradesh. Because that's the way it is. My parents' generation, when they made a map, their map of India would have been what is now Pakistan and also Burma, because that was, and Sri Lanka. For me, if you say India ka map and I have to draw it here, I start with that Kutch part, yu karke, and then down the peninsula and up. And then because you don't want to make a mistake with the Himalayas, you just make some lines. Point is, what do we recognize as any heartland can shift. And I think the importance of Afghanistan is something we need to re-look at. The Bhati stories are that Raja Gaj made Gajni, which is now Ghazni. Raj and Gaj, and I forget who is the father and who is the son. But when they are then told, ek sapna aata hai, in which he offers, Devi appears and she says, "Main bhooki hu." So neend mein, the Raja offers his head. So she says, "You've pleased me. I will still come. Meri bhook nahi miti, but your line will survive. You will not survive. Your line will survive, but in the story, east of here. So send your family." So Shalivahan, the son, is then sent to marry the Dukhtare Hindia, the daughter of India. And he doesn't go back, and he founds Sialkot, and then eventually the Bhatis. That's why unke usme story aati, which the much maligned Todd is also quoted, but it's also in Rima Hooja's History of Rajasthan, jo inke alag-alag capitals rahe hain, which include Gajner, not Gajner, Gajni and whatever, and Lodrava, and then Jaisalmer. The route coming back. So I think lots has happened. It's wonderful that all of you have read so much and you have questions. And that's why I think we should pool all your questions even.
No, go ahead. That's okay, I can talk to you later.
Thank you. A very good morning to all of you. Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful lecture. Ma'am, this question is related to Sahasrabhav temple. Ma'am, recently I've been there and I've seen the photograph that you've shown has only 2 complexes. And now I think there are 5 and 6. So how, as a research scholar, how should we trace the development? And because the Eklingji Nath temple complex also, which is nearby, there are a lot of restrictions on the photography and on the research that we can do. So when the resources are limited, I think the only point that we can catch on is the communities. And when I asked the villagers, they didn't know much about what's happening, and maybe they have, and then somebody was telling me that the Murtikars, the Sudras have migrated to Bombay, and so the skills are also moving with the people. So how do we trace the history when it comes to oral histories also, and how do we orally take their interviews, and because they are not very open, and they may not understand our language, unko to typically unhi ki language aati hai, and they connect well with the local, with the language. Now we don't know the language, but yes, with empathy we can actually ask, being humble. So how do we trace the development?
Yeah, you have several layers to that question, and I'll try and answer it.
Sorry.
One is, no, that's fine. It's always good to have questions. One is, there's a lot of emphasis nowadays on stakeholders and original community, but there is very rarely something called an original community. Okay? Just by living here doesn't make me an expert on this place. So in the case of the Sahasrabhahu, the Sasbahu temples, one is that the Archaeological Survey of India has done a certain amount of restoration work. Actually, they should only be doing conservation. But they have done that. Whatever is allowed within the rules, they have done. So they would have used the correct information, the general public has their own ideas. And sometimes when we assume that they are the original, so in the case of Delhi, they'll say Lal Dora areas, wo original hai. Unko bhi aap pucho, there was a talk and somebody said, ye original hai. And this, I said, how old? They said, nahi, hum 4 generation pehle aaye. Most of us have moved not just in the 20th century. 20th century has been more dramatic. But other periods also were. So when Maharana Pratap's area is being attacked, what is the official directive given by the state of Mewar to people along the route of the march? कि जितने पानी के स्रोत हैं उनको नष्ट कर दो. Breach your ponds. Don't plant. People should move away. Now, if people are moving away, obviously they go away. They'll come back with new ideas. So, somewhere, this thing of the pristine, we have to question. The other is public information or right to public information. So, when something is looked after by the government, you will get that. But if it is looked after, if it's a private thing, then there is also that maryada of how much can I mean, I can say, look, I'm doing a research on kitchens. I have to see your kitchen. But that's a very arbitrary way. I can't really come in. वो तो plague commissioner भी वो कर रहे थे. One of the reasons that there was anger against the British during the Bombay presidency is you're entering people's homes. So just because that information is of interest to you or me doesn't mean that we have the public right. So if in the case of Ekling Ji or anywhere, if it is private, then what are the privacy allowed to them? Okay. That's why I said there are so many layers to what you are asking. Sir.
Just one.
Having known you for half a century and more, we are privileged, now we are pleased to see you rise and made a niche for yourself in the historical research. And the position that you are occupied in Rajasthan, and you have contributed to the World Heritage Site, Jaipur efforts are also have been and in yourself. So why not make some effort, because you have a place, you are a public intellectual, recognized, world over. No, we are not tired yet. We are retired bureaucrats, not tired yet.
Correct.
But we don't have a lobby. Bombay industry, they made a Bombay plan and convinced government. Even now they are doing maybe money. You don't know. In the policy formation. So you have a burden of responsibility. With your position so much, not only because of contribution. And the World Heritage Site, we must do something. Because it is slipping away from me. I am told.
It is slipping away.
It is slipping away. It was putting the danger zone or whatever in danger zone, once I think. That it was restored with your efforts and I don't know.
So, first of all, thank you for your kind words. And you don't actually, so many of you in this room don't realize how much you have contributed to my learning process over time. Really, I mean this. We would have these snippets of a conversation. Everything helps you learn. I mean that. And that is why I said if you can, all of you can come together as a policy think tank. I am willing to be around, but that doesn't mean that any of the governments that are around.
Because you are in the public eye now. You are no longer visible,
If it looks like they will listen, yes. But I think you have a powerful lobby, so let us join hands. Let us join hands. As you said, you're not like, yes, you're still.
You have rightly used the word lobby. We must come together. So they have been talking about it. I'm willing for it.
Let's go for it.
मेरा एक
Sir.
क्वेश्चन है
Especially over tea, maybe, I think.
from certain archaeological survey sites, very important and very valuable as far as the archaeological value is concerned, things are stolen by the local people and they are being sold to the smugglers or who smuggle it to foreign countries or things like that. Archaeological Survey of India doesn't have that much of staff neither nor that much of fund to protect all these sites. कोई एक चौकीदार रख देते हैं, वो गांव का रहता है, कभी आता है कभी नहीं आता है, सारी चीज़ खुली हुई है, तो इसको कैसे आप रिएक्ट करेंगे? हाउ डू यू रिस्पॉन्ड टू इट? क्या करना चाहिए इसमें?
नहीं, इसके बारे में वही है कि सबको मिलके ही सोचना पड़ेगा। एक तो ये है कि उस चीज़ को हम लोग बेचते क्यों हैं? मतलब है धरोहर, आपको सुंदर लग रही है, आप उसकी कॉपी रख लो ना।
नहीं, वो लोकल
उसको नहीं होता।
नहीं है।
मेरा जब मैं पीएचडी कर रही थी तो एक जगह पे उन्होंने ये राशमी तहसील में कोई गांव था, वो बार बार कि जी आके हमारा वो देखो, कुंड देखो। अब आई वॉज मोर इंटरेस्टेड इन द आहड़ पीरियड, पट्सी का जिद कर रहे कुंड देख लो, अब कुंड तो यूं, एंड आई वॉज इन माई 20s, दे डिडंट वांट टू होल्ड मी ऑल्सो। एनीवे, गुर्जर प्रतिहार पीरियड का, उस पर मूर्तियाँ लगी थी। जब देखा तो इट वॉज वर्थ इट, एंड दे टोल्ड मी कि यहाँ बहुत साल पहले एक पंजाबी कलेक्टर थे, तो ये उन्होंने हमको बताया कि ये सिर्फ कुंड नहीं है, तुम्हारे परदादियाँ, तुम्हारे परदादाओं ने यहीं तो छोरे होंगे तो इसमें कंकर मारे होंगे, और परदादियों ने यहाँ से पानी भरा होगा। तो वी इंटरनलाइज, उन्होंने ये नहीं इंटरनलाइज वर्ड कि हमने कहा बात सही है। फिर वहाँ की मूर्तियाँ चोरी हुई तो हमने शोर मचाया, एंड दे वेंट थ्रू एवरी लेवल फाइटिंग कि हमें चाहिए, एंड दे सेड भग जाओ। इवेंचुअली कहते हैं गांव की सरहद पे आके वो मूर्तियाँ पड़ी थी, देखो हमने वापस लगा दी हैं। And that is what bucked me up, because then I was able to place who that collector was. You know, if that all of you have, that's why I'm saying you don't realize the impact you have all had on me through all the work you have all been doing. आपके चाहे कोई भी field हो, whether it is as an administrator, whether it is policing, whether it is as a teacher, you have all contributed, and therefore ये जो आप कह रहे हो ना कि क्या होना चाहिए, ये एक बड़ा मुहिम है, और उसी स्तर पे कि ये चीज़ हमारी है।
हाँ।
आप सिर्फ सरकार की नहीं है, सरकार की तो नष्ट करो।
नहीं, that is true. Some committees may be formed of local people जो interested हो ऐसे, इस तरह से कुछ
और लोकल जो गांव वाले भी जो हैं, बिकॉज आई रिमेंबर व्हेन, सो माय फादर वाज क्रेजी अबाउट एनीथिंग ओल्ड। कहीं जा रहे हैं म्यूजियम देखो, अब वो ज़्यादातर क्या होता था, गांव के बच्चे, यू नो, रनी नोजेस फॉलोइंग यू, एंड द चौकीदार वुड से हट जा, एंड माय पेरेंट्स वुड से नहीं, इनको देखने दो, इनकी जगह है। आई एम श्योर यू हैव डन दैट। इफ यू डोंट हैव द लोकल पीपल इंटरेस्टेड, दे आर नॉट गोइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज गोइंग, देन इट इज समथिंग एक्सोटिक फॉर देम। फिर कहेंगे क्या है, फिर उसमें नाम लिखेंगे। तो क्या कर सकते हैं, आई थिंक समथिंग वी कैन एगनाइज ओवर, लेकिन कैसे कर सकते हैं, तो शुरुआत तो आप लोगों ने कर ही ली है। Start working towards the think tank and the advice that can come, और आप लोगों को तो ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लगेगा to make a policy paper, because you know the subject. I really mean that. Let Rajasthan की ये पहल हो जाए in which this information, this knowledge that you have can actually come back to society. Because now you are not even bound by कि ये नहीं बोल सकते, वो नहीं बोल, ऑफिशियल सीक्रेसी एक्ट तो आप पे है ही नहीं अब, तो अब आप बेबाक होके बोलिए, हम सुनने वाले हैं। वो बैठिए इंटैक्ट की, एंड आई एम हियर सीरियसली।
देखिए,
Yes.
like to add to जो सारी बातें हो रही हैं about आपने किसी ने पूछा था, आपने पूछा था about
So shall we already there? Thanks, Rajan, please. So thank you very much, Dr. Rima ji, for such an
चाय पे चर्चा।
हाँ, बिल्कुल।
Ladies and gentlemen, we are feeling privileged to have you here, ma'am. You have given us such an interesting and enlightening lecture. In fact, your lecture has been a journey through ages, telling us so many interesting stories about stones and carvings. So, on behalf of All India Service Pensioners Association, I extend my thanks to you for having spared your time and come here. I'm also thankful to all of you here for coming here and listening to this lecture and making this program a success. Thank you very much.
So my thanks and gratitude.